Under the command of Abu Sufyan, the vast Confederate army approached Medina. Tribes united on a scale never seen before. They came with one purpose: to destroy Muhammad and his followers, finish what they had failed to accomplish at Uhud, and wipe out the Muslims from Medina, men, women, children, and the elderly. But when they arrived, they stopped in astonishment. An obstacle stood before them, one they had never expected.
What is this trench? When did they dig it? Nothing will stop us. We will not leave until they are completely defeated. We will camp here.
Abu Sufyan's decision meant one thing. The trench had stopped their advance, but it could not stop the siege. They would remain until Medina surrendered, and they would not return home without achieving their goal. They established its camp outside Medina, beginning the siege. They would study the trench, search for weaknesses, and assess the situation before attempting an assault at first light. By night, the siege was a terrifying sight. The sheer size of the army and the threat it carried shook the believers deeply, for defeat meant more than losing the city. It meant the destruction of the Muslim community and the lives of their families and children. At dawn, the Prophet organized the city's defenses, placing guards along the trench and securing every point that could offer the enemy a way through.
Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! Allah's messenger commands you, do not let them break through from your side.
Abu Sufyan's plan was a massive assault on Medina, relying on his overwhelming numerical advantage. He would unleash his entire army at once, smash through the defenses, and burst across the trench like a storm, sweeping aside all who stood in its path. But the trench stopped their advance. Their horses could not cross it, and every attempt to break through was met by the Muslims' determined defense. They fought with courage, trusting that God would support them and that truth would ultimately prevail over falsehood. The lesson of Uhud had taught them that victory demanded steadfastness and obedience. After a full day of relentless attempts, the assault had failed to break the Muslim defenses. Abu Sufyan realized that pressing on would only bring further losses to his army. He ordered a temporary withdrawal, bringing the first assault to an end. The Muslims' steadfast defense against the fierce assault gave them a growing sense that God was with them. Yet their relief was overshadowed by one painful matter. The battle had caused them to miss a prayer. The Prophet then prayed against the Confederates. May God fill them with fire as they kept us from the prayer. After the unexpected failure of the Confederates to overrun Medina, Abu Sufyan met with Khalid ibn al-Walid, his cavalry commander, to consult on their next course of action.
I sent scouts along the trench. They found a few possible crossing points, but only a small number of riders could pass through.
We'll try to break through tomorrow morning. You will lead it, Khalid. Take Ikrimah with you.
Khalid ibn al-Walid and Ikrimah ibn Abi Jahl searched the trench for a weak point, a narrow section that might allow a small group of horsemen to cross. They found one and agreed to attack there, hoping to break through the defenses.
Protect the opening! Follow the messenger's command!
Khalid's swift maneuver was spotted from one of the defensive positions along the trench, commanded by Usaid ibn Khudayr. The Muslims' vigilance allowed them to detect the attack in time. They surged forward with fierce determination, unshaken by the reputation of Khalid ibn al-Walid, known throughout Arabia as Quraysh's greatest warrior. With his military experience, Khalid ibn al-Walid realized that he was facing men willing to sacrifice their lives rather than allow their position to become the cause of defeat for the rest of the Muslims. Retreat and surrender were simply not in their vocabulary, so he chose to spare his men further losses, withdrew and accepted that the mission had failed. Khalid ibn al-Walid and his men returned to the Confederate camp empty-handed. It meant one thing: bringing down Medina would not be as easy as their mighty army had expected. As the siege dragged on, the Prophet remained among his companions, strengthening their resolve and reminding them to stand firm. The enemy was vast, but their faith could not be shaken. Behind the trench, the believers held their ground. But while the believers stood firm, the hypocrites sought to weaken their resolve. They mocked the promise of victory, saying, "How can you believe his promise of conquering the kingdoms of Persia and Rome when you cannot even sleep at night, fearing that you may wake to find Arab swords at your throats? By God, his promises are nothing but deception." Their words were meant to spread fear and shake the faith of those already under immense pressure. After days of stalled fighting and a long, frustrating siege, the waiting had become unbearable. Then a formidable warrior emerged, Amr ibn Abd Wud. His name alone was enough to shake the hearts of his enemies. He called for a Muslim champion to face him in single combat. Ali ibn Abi Talib stepped forward. Before accepting the challenge, Ali called upon Amr to embrace Islam, but Amr refused. When Ali then challenged him to a duel, Amr replied, "By God, I do not wish to kill you." But Ali answered, "By God, I have no such reluctance to kill you." Enraged by the answer, Amr dismounted, and the duel began. Ali's victory over Amr ibn Abd Wud, one of Arabia's most feared and formidable warriors, elevated his name as a fearless champion. It lifted the spirits of the Muslims and deepened the growing frustration and despair within the ranks of the Confederates. Realizing that breaking through the trench and the Muslim defenses would be extremely difficult, Abu Sufyan and the leaders of the Confederates turned to another strategy. They called upon Hayy ibn Akhtab, the leader of the exiled Banu Nadir, and sent him to persuade Banu Qurayza to abandon their obligations under the Charter of Medina and break their treaty with Muhammad. Their fortress stood on the southern side of the city, opening the possibility of threatening Medina from behind.
Ka'b, I have come to you with a great opportunity.
No, Hayy. You have brought me trouble. I have a covenant with Muhammad, and I will not break it.
Ka'b, Quraysh and Ghatafan have gathered an army against Muhammad, unlike anything Medina has faced before. And if they abandon us, who will face the consequences then?
No, they will not abandon us. But if they do, then I will enter this fortress with you and face the same fate.
Ka'b ibn Asad, the leader of Banu Qurayza, agreed to join the Confederates and help them threaten Medina from the south, breaking the covenant and creating one of the most dangerous betrayals in Islamic history.
Messenger of God, Banu Qurayza have broken their treaty.
What? They are attacking the city from the south. We are surrounded.
The news was devastating. For a moment, the weight of the danger was immense, but even in that darkest moment, the Prophet's faith never wavered. He knew that Allah would never abandon him.
Allahu Akbar! Rejoice in the victory of Allah!
The Prophet had placed his trust in Allah's victory, and soon help would come from the most unexpected place, the enemy camp itself. The man who would help change the course of the battle was Nu'aym ibn Mas'ud, a man from Ghatafan, who had secretly embraced Islam and kept his faith hidden from everyone around him. That night, Nu'aym secretly entered the Prophet's camp. He revealed that he had embraced Islam while his people still knew nothing of his secret. The Prophet gave him a mission, to do whatever he could to remove the imminent danger threatening the Muslims. Nu'aym left that night, carrying a mission that could change the fate of the entire battle. He began with those who trusted him most, Banu Qurayza, a people who knew him well and trusted him. He warned them that Quraysh and Ghatafan were fighting far from their homes. If the siege failed, they could simply leave and return to their tribes, while Banu Qurayza would be left alone to face the consequences. He advised them not to join the attack unless they first received hostages from the leaders of the Confederates, a guarantee that the alliance would not abandon them. Then Nu'aym went to Quraysh and Ghatafan. He warned them that Banu Qurayza might regret breaking their agreement and could seek to regain Muhammad's trust by handing over men from the Confederate army. Doubt began to spread. The alliance that had gathered to destroy Medina was now beginning to fear betrayal from within. Abu Sufyan did not act on Nu'aym's warning alone. He decided to test the loyalty of Banu Qurayza. A message was sent, urging them to join the coming attack. The message was delivered to Ka'b ibn Asad. The Confederates were asking Banu Qurayza to fulfill their commitment and join the attack. The message confirmed Nu'aym's warning. Ka'b remembered that Quraysh and Ghatafan could abandon the siege and return home, leaving Banu Qurayza to face the consequences alone. Banu Qurayza agreed, but demanded hostages from the Confederate leaders as a guarantee that they would not be abandoned. The messenger returned with their answer. Their answer was exactly what Nu'aym had predicted. Any doubt Abu Sufyan had was now gone. Nu'aym ibn Mas'ud's warning had proven true. Suddenly the weather turned violently. Fierce, bitterly cold winds swept across the battlefield, raging through the days and nights. They tore at the tents, extinguished the fires, and made an already desperate situation even harsher and more unbearable. On one of those bitterly cold nights, the Prophet asked for a volunteer to slip into the enemy camp and bring back news of their situation. But the cold and exhaustion had taken such a toll that not a single man was able to rise from where he sat. The Prophet then called upon Hudhayfa directly, ordering him to rise and go. Despite the bitter cold and crushing exhaustion, Hudhayfa obeyed without hesitation and set out toward the enemy camp. Under the cover of darkness, Hudhayfa reached the enemy camp. The storm had turned the night into chaos. Hudhayfa moved deeper into the camp, blending silently among the enemy, until he became one of them. Suddenly Abu Sufyan grew suspicious. He ordered every man to identify the men sitting beside him.
Before we proceed, we must be certain of who is among us. Everyone, check the identity of the man seated next to you.
Thinking quickly, Hudhayfa immediately asked the men seated on his right and left who they were, before anyone could ask him.
Who are you?
From Fazarah.
And you?
From Murrah.
In an instant, Hudhayfa turned suspicion away from himself and remained safely hidden among them. Then Abu Sufyan addressed the men. The alliance was breaking apart. The storm was growing stronger and the siege could no longer continue. Hudhayfa returned through the darkness, carrying the news that the Confederates were leaving. When the Prophet finished his prayer, Hudhayfa brought him the news. Abu Sufyan had decided to return home, and the siege was coming to an end. The greatest threat the Muslim community had ever faced was finally beginning to fade.
Allahu Akbar, walillahi alhamd.
By dawn, the impossible had happened. The Confederate army was gone. After weeks of fear and hardship, the siege of Medina had finally come to an end. The siege was over. The Confederates were gone. But before Medina could truly return to peace, one final crisis still remained. Banu Qurayza, those who betrayed the Muslims and broke their covenant to defend Medina. They joined the ranks of the enemy, and were it not for God's mercy upon the Muslims, their fate might have been sealed forever. The Muslims surrounded the strongholds of Banu Qurayza. Those who had threatened Medina from within were now cut off, facing the consequences of their decision. Days passed. Surrounded and cut off from the outside, the people inside Banu Qurayza's strongholds faced a growing uncertainty about what would come next.
I don't know how much longer we can stay here.
We have nowhere else to go. This waiting is exhausting.
As the siege dragged on, the pressure inside the stronghold grew unbearable. Ka'b ibn Asad gathered his people. The choices before them were narrowing, and none of them were easy.
I believe we should surrender and seek a way to settle this matter. We should ask that Sa'd ibn Mu'adh judge our case. We were once allies. Perhaps he will judge in our favor.
Perhaps he will speak for us, just as others once spoke for those who came before.
At the request of Banu Qurayza, the Prophet agreed that Sa'd ibn Mu'adh would judge their case. Still weakened by an arrow wound he had suffered while defending Medina during the Battle of the Trench, Sa'd was brought on a donkey to the Prophet to deliver his judgment on Banu Qurayza. Sa'd ibn Mu'adh was brought before the Prophet. The man chosen to judge now faced one of the most consequential decisions of his life.
Will you agree to accept my judgment in this matter? The judgment is that the men shall be executed, and the women and children enslaved, and the spoils divided. This is the judgment of God.
With Sa'd ibn Mu'adh's judgment, the fate of Banu Qurayza was decided. The men who had taken part in the betrayal were put to death, while the women and children were taken into captivity. Thus ended the crisis of Banu Qurayza, and with it, the final threat that had remained within Medina after the Battle of the Trench. Madinah had survived its greatest test. The siege was over, the danger had passed, and the city could finally breathe again.